Well, hey, everybody. My name is Patrick Sugup with Sugup Real Estate Services here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And this week, we're bringing on Drew Caesar, who's a certified residential appraiser here in Northern Colorado. He's been around town. His family's been around town for a long time, and he's been in the business for a while. And excited to hear his story, how he got involved, services that he provides, and providing his expertise to you guys here in the Northern Colorado areas. Drew, I appreciate you coming on, man, and really looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, one of the first questions I, like to start out with is hearing, my guest's journey, what got them involved with the industry and where they are today. So if you wouldn't mind sharing how you're sharing a little bit about your journey.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in Northern Colorado, went to Fort Collins High School, graduated from the University of Colorado. And my parents were in the restaurant industry when I was a kid. And then after college, I worked for them for a couple years, but I realized that my heart wasn't in that. So I was looking for a career change. And I had an aunt who was a real estate appraiser, and she was wanting to retire, but she didn't want her business to just go away. So she trained me and another woman to be appraisers. And then we bought the business from her. And the other lady who she trained has since left the industry, but I bought the business from my aunt. Gosh, it's probably been 10 years ago. I started appraising in 2007, February of 2007. So I've been doing that ever since then.
Yeah. I got my real estate license in 2013, and it was a hopping market when I jumped in. And I remember when we were getting started, with a lot of finance deals, but one of the biggest issues was the constraint on, how could get an appraiser in there because there just was so few of you and so many deals on the market. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the education that you have to go through and, how does one become an appraiser? From my perspective, it seems like it's a pretty intensive process.
Yeah, it's not easy. So you have to take 150 hours worth of classes, then you have to pass a test. And then you have to do supervised appraisal work for 2,000 hours. So that's anywhere from, 1 to 2 years of working directly underneath a certified residential appraiser, where you're going on inspections with them, you're writing up reports, you're doing the market research, you're taking the pictures and all that stuff. And then once you're to that point, once you've completed those 2,000 hours, then you can take more classes. I think it's another 75 or 80 hours of classes. And then you have to take another test. Then you can become what's called a licensed appraiser. And if you're a licensed appraiser, you can work on your own. You just can't handle complex assignments. You can't do stuff over $1 million, stuff like that. So then to become a certified residential appraiser, which is the next level up, which is what I am, you have to do another set of classes and then pass another test to become certified residential, where you can do, multi-million-dollar appraisals and complex assignments, investment properties, duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes and stuff like that. So it's hard to get into and it's hard to get rolling. It's hard to find somebody who's willing to train you because they're essentially training their competition. So there's not a huge incentive for somebody to take on a trainee. So that's tough. And then, they're not going to want to pay you much as you're getting your hours in, just because you're still doing all the work and they don't want to give up their income, So I was fortunate. I had an opportunity to do some fix and flip houses with my dad as an investor as I was training and kind of getting rolling in it. So those first, 3 to 4 years, because I wasn't making any money appraising. So I was lucky to have that side income.
Sure.
So that was a blessing. But yeah, it's once you're going and once you're established, it's really great, but it's so hard to get your foot in.
Well, honestly, like I've had appraisals done by you. We haven't had a long history relationship, but your name is, I see it time and time again because there's just not many. And I love it when I see, a lender's like, oh yeah, we got Drew doing this one. I was like, I just feel confident, It's like, all right, cool. I've had him before. So great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah. I like to think I do a good job. I do a lot of review appraisals where lenders or realtors will reach out to me and have me review appraisals that they have done by other people. And that's been really beneficial to me as I've grown in the business, not only to see what other appraisers are doing, but it teaches me what not to do. And,
Mm-hmm.
Helps me, it's good. It helps me realize how important it is to do a good job and to be thorough with what I do, because there's a lot of appraisers out there who just are basically filling out the form and moving on to the next one,
Sure.
and it's a big deal for people. We do, however many appraisals per week, but for those people buying the property, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just a drop in the bucket for us, but for them, that could be the difference between their kid going to college or something, if they're taking cash out on a refi, or if, they need to sell their house to move somewhere for a job. Like if we don't take it seriously and do as thorough a job as possible, it can screw up the whole thing. So I pride myself on, really taking my time and doing as thorough a job as possible.
That's great. This week it was funny. We were under contract. Everything's been going really smooth on this deal, and I felt like the property that we were purchasing, and it's a finance deal, but I felt like there was tons of value. We were getting at a really good price, but still it needed to appraise where we wanted it to appraise at. And generally, like, I had all the confidence in the world that I was going to get to that figure or above, but I don't want to overstep my bounds or put my foot in my mouth. But the anxiety from the buyers that I was working with really started to kind of like feed off into me. And I was just like, oh man, I just can't wait to get this appraisal. And we got it. Everything worked out. Numbers looked great. So we were good. But you're absolutely right. For these guys, it was a matter of buying their first house, and subletting their rental. Or if it did not, it was going to really put a strain on them. And I felt like we were going to get a good deal. But I mean, honestly, that appraisal really held a ton of power. Yeah. So talk to me, if an appraisal comes low, is there anything that a buyer could do? You were just talking about a review appraisal. Talk to me about, is there anything that a buyer can do if an appraisal comes in low on a property that they're looking to purchase?
Yeah, there's different steps. It all depends on the lender, but they can dispute the appraisal. The realtors oftentimes are involved in the process, providing comps and, providing lists of features in the home and stuff like that, upgrades and things that might have been done. So if it does come in lower, if they do have issues, they can go through the lender, who then contacts us to say, hey, did you consider this sale? Or how'd you come up with this adjustment? So there are things you can do.
How often do you find yourself getting that information from either a realtor or a lender and going back and saying, yeah, you know what, you're right, I did miss that? Or how often is it, it sounds obviously like they take very, strong pride in your work. Does it kind of be like, no, actually, I did take that into consideration. Here's why I kept it at that value?
Yeah, it doesn't happen to me a lot, thankfully, because I do, like to make sure I've taken everything into account when I'm doing a report. But, it does happen occasionally where, I miss a comp, or, there's something funky about the property that I didn't quite take into account. So it does happen on occasion, but I like to include lots of commentary in my reports about how I selected the comps and how I made the adjustments, and, the important features of the property that I'm giving value to, or that aren't as valuable that, the realtor might have placed a premium on, that the market's just not supporting that value. So, sure. I mean, it does happen. And that's why it's important to work with a good realtor when you're doing a sale, just so they have your back and they can advocate for you as much as they can.
Sure. So besides appraisals, do you provide any other services to the general public? And if so, what else are you kind of offering up with your expertise? Because I'll tell you, one of my good buddies is the chief assessor at the Laramie County office, and you guys are so knowledgeable about pricing of homes and how to get to certain things and what values are. So it's interesting to see how your expertise can really lend itself to other products or services.
Yeah. So I do, I only do residential appraisals, but I do them for sales, for lenders, for refinances, for lenders. I do stuff for a handful of realtors prior to them placing properties on the market. I help them price their properties with appraisals. I do lots of divorce work for attorneys, where the two parties are disputing the value of the property. So I do an appraisal for them. And then in addition to that, I do floor plan measurements for realtors, where I go to the house before it's listed and I measure the interior and exterior and draw up the floor plan with room dimensions and floor coverings and all the square footages. so that they can put it on the brochure and put it into the MLS system. So it keeps me busy for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's only one of you and there's so many of us and so many requests and home. Well, actually, I honestly, I wish there was more homes for sale right now, but
there's nothing out there right now.
There's nothing out there right now. So I guess, we could deal with a little bit more inventory, but hopefully we can sort that out sooner than later, but who knows?
Yeah.
What does, I'll tell you, for me, opening an appraisal can be kind of daunting. Honestly, you look at it and, well, for one, go find where the value is, because it seems like, all right, there's different places, but I mean, there's so many different pages with, cost adjustments for comparables and things of that nature. What does an appraisal just generally look like, kind of start to bottom?
Well, the standard appraisal form is called the 1004 form. That's for most single family properties. And the first page, the top of the page is just the property information, the legal description, owner of public record and stuff like that. Then in the middle of the page, you can describe the site, the size of the lot, if there's a sprinkler system, all that kind of stuff regarding the exterior of the property. And then in the bottom of the first page is where we describe the subject property itself, the house. That's where it says the square footage, the bedroom and bathroom counts. And then there's spaces where we can type out kind of some detailed descriptions of the property, additional features, and the condition of the property. So then page 2 is the sales comparison approach. There's 3 approaches we do when we do an appraisal. The sales comparison approach is where we pick comparable sales to compare to the subject property and then make adjustments for the differences. So that's what's on page 2. And then I think on the bottom of page 2 is the cost approach, which is where it's tough to do for properties that aren't, or for homes that aren't newly constructed, just because of depreciation and finding lot values and stuff like that. It can be difficult, but I mean, it's a handy tool for us to use in most cases, but it's generally not as reliable as a sales comparison approach. And then the third approach that we use is the income approach. And that's primarily used for income properties, 2 to 4 unit properties where the units are rented. And in that approach, we have to determine the gross monthly rent. And then we develop what's called a gross rent multiplier. You do that by finding comparable sales that have sold and what they were rented for. And you extrapolate that out. So those are the 3 approaches. Probably 90 to 95% of the time, the sales comparison approach is going to be the most relevant and the most reliable indicator of value. But the cost approach and the income approach are also very important depending on what kind of property it is.
What would you say, you kind of on that first page, lot size, square footage, bed bath count, are those going to be the main drivers of value? And, what else would be kind of granite countertops or, an updated kitchen comparatively to one that with oak trim and, Formica?
Yeah. So, neighborhood is going to be important. You want to find comps that are as close as possible to the subject, in proximity. But then, it's the things that are kind of what they are, the square footage of the house, the size of the lot, the age of the house. Those are important things that, they're not very subjective. They just are what they are. And then after that, it's, like you said, stuff like granite countertops, custom cabinetry, hardwood flooring, high ceilings, solid wood doors, stuff like that. And that's kind of the appraisal. That's why it's important to find a good appraiser, because it's, it's kind of art and kind of science, because there's certain things that aren't going to change about the property, but there's certain things that you have to figure out, why did this property sell for what it was or what it did, and what mattered to that sale. And that's why it's important that we talk to the realtors involved in the sale to kind of get their feedback and the feedback that the public gave them about, when they were walking through the property, what did people like about the house? What didn't they like? Yeah. So it all kind of ties together into one thing that we kind of sift through to come up with our best estimate of value.
Have you developed kind of, you discuss art, which it's definitely, very, very unique houses. Now it's nice when it's, subdivision built in the mid 90s and there's 5 others to look at and very similar, but
right.
Then you've got, kind of custom lots, custom homes where maybe you've got pressed board cabinets comparatively to, cherry hardwoods.
Right.
Do you have you developed any type of like spreadsheet that like, has essentially tiers or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I use Excel. I have just kind of a proprietary spreadsheet that I use for stuff. It was really helpful when I was, figuring out what kind of adjustments to make and what was important. It's kind of drilled into my brain now, but I do keep the Excel stuff pretty up to date just because it's good to have that support in case I'm asked about it by a lender or an underwriter. But yeah, it's important to keep up with that because, trends change and things that are important to buyers change. Yeah. So you never know what's going to be important. So got to keep it all there to take it all into account.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting. What changes comes back around to be, what's cooling in and, values and perspectives and, what people value. So is there anything that, a seller of a home, you're a real estate agent or, and you get asked this question and they ask you, hey, they've scheduled the appraisal. Probably by this time if they've scheduled the appraisal, it's too late. But when they're prepping the home, we're getting it listing ready and they ask, what can we do to help if we're going to get aggressive on this price? Hey, I provided them a range, I think it's going to sell between this and this. You could go middle of the road and get a fair amount of offers. You can go for a bidding war, or you can go for the needle in the haystack approach of price that property as high as you possibly get. And maybe you find that person that just fits every snake and need. And if you price it there, that seller and you have to have a discussion, is it going to appraise? And what could one do to, without dropping $10,000 to $30,000 on like a, 1,800 square foot buy level to help positively impact an appraisal's view of that property?
It helps to just have everything as tidy as you can. We're not looking at the home's cleanliness necessarily, but I mean, if you can have stuff picked up off the floors and if you can have stuff off the counters as much as possible, if it smells nice inside, pets aren't around, stuff like that, we're not looking at the clutter necessarily, but it does, can get into your head. So making sure the house is clean and as tidy as possible is important. And then I like it when realtors or homeowners provide me with kind of a list of things that they might have done to the property over the years, as far as, the age of the mechanical systems like the furnace and the water heater and the roof and stuff like that. If they've added, new insulation or anything like that in the attic, if they did new windows, stuff like that. These are all things that an appraiser should ask as they're going through the house or after they're done with their walkthrough. But I like it when it's, kind of provided to me. So I not have to dig for it. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, as long as people are taking pride in their house, I think, appraisers there's usually a range of values in the report of indicated values of the comparable sales. So we can kind of tend towards whichever end of the range we feel is appropriate. So if the house is as tight as possible, it'll certainly help.
Yeah. Now, do you guys, you discuss questions that you may ask or should ask, or an appraiser should, as well as a listing agent or seller providing information to help the appraiser understand the home a little bit better? Because you guys are going to be spending, 2-3 hours in the property, whereas somebody else has spent 20 years and really knows it backwards and forwards. What additional information are you given, or do you go and you look at like, what's it listed on the MLS for? What is it under contract for? Are there concessions? Do you review the contract? And does that dictate anything in your evaluation?
Yeah. So if it's for a sale, if the appraisal is for a sale, there is a spot on the front page of the appraisal report for our contract review. So the contract is going to be provided to us by the lender. So when I do an appraisal for a sale, I don't like to look at the contracts until towards the end of my process, just because I don't want to go in with any kind of preconceived notion.
Sure.
But after I've looked for comps and kind of put some stuff on paper and seen what it's looking like, then I like to review the contract and see, like you said, what the contract price is, what some inclusions or exclusions are, if there's any sales concessions, stuff like that. And there's also a page or a spot on the front page of the appraisal report to discuss the listing history of the property. Mm-hmm. So we type out what it was listed for, price wise, status changes, whether it goes under contract and then back active, and then any price changes. So that stuff is definitely all taken into account when we do an appraisal.
Interesting. There was a property on the market, won't say address, won't say listing agent, won't say anything like that, but it's per the listing agent's own, basically admonishment, I guess. They went onto the market just way overpriced, and it's had reduction after reduction after reduction. It's sat on the market. It's actually expired, came off, went back on. And at that point, that it tells us all a story about that property. Realtors who are looking to buying, investors, appraisers, obviously now is from what it sounds like. So like you said, there's definitely different strategies of pricing, but it doesn't help anybody. And even it sounds like on the financing side, on the appraisal, if your property has been sitting on the market for 200 days in a market where average days are, median days on market's 45.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to call realtors if I'm struggling with an appraisal with the value. I like to call the realtors and find out, how they came up with their price. And, more often than not lately, they're telling me that they're just picking a number out and seeing if it'll stick.
Oh, God.
Most good realtors have lots of data to support what they're pricing stuff at, but I'm seeing it a lot more and more lately that they're like, oh, the market's so hot, so we're just going to price it as high as we can and we'll see what happens. So I don't think that's doing a good service to the clients, to the homeowners, but
see, I accidentally became a real estate agent. Like it was never my intention. I got kind of similar to you, you worked with your dad on fix and flips. For me, it was, I got my real estate license to save on the buy side commissions and, on the sell side if we were doing flips. And after a few, couple of years, people, friends and family kind of reached out, hey, could you help me buy? And I was like, well, I'd absolutely love to, because I'm not in it to make, money per se. So I can absolutely have your best interest at heart and not trying to make a sale. But I've always been the numbers guy of like, I just have a spreadsheet, kind of like exactly what you said, age, lot size, square footage, total square footage finished, bedroom, bathroom count. And then I just extrapolate all that data to what the subject property is and come up with a range of what it could be, based off of some of those figures. I am not the guy that says, oh my goodness, we'll paint this pink and have the great flooring. And don't get me wrong, it definitely helps on the sell the dream. But I think, when it gets down to it, people are looking at their pocketbooks and seeing, can I afford this? And doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Numbers are numbers, they're not going to lie. So, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what are kind of your, goals moving forward? I appreciate you getting on here and coming on with me and sharing your expertise. What is your kind of future looking like with your business?
I hope to just kind of keep doing the same thing. I love my job. It's perfect for my lifestyle. I have 2 kids in high school. So it allows me to, go to their sporting events and stuff like that. And I can, pretty much set my own hours as long as I'm being responsible about it. But, keep doing what I'm doing. My wife and I would like to buy a couple more investment properties. They're hard to find right now just because interest rates are so low and there's no inventory on the market.
Have you looked at new builds?
We've talked about it. Yes.
I've never been, I'm always about finding these, diamonds in the rough, value add properties. You've done fix and flips. You've got that mindset, that eye, but man, there's a few different new builds that the rents that they're getting and the amount of maintenance costs that you can save by having everything brand new for 3 to 5 years. I was working with a 1031 client and I threw out the idea to him, the concept, and I started really digging into him. I was like, this kind of makes sense. If you have capital to place. Now, if you are looking at making, a better return or a higher return, yeah, sure, those value adds. But if you have capital to place that you want to secure, safe, 8 to 12% return on your investment. New builds aren't out of the question for me right now. It's kind of interesting.
I know, it's crazy. I never would have thought about it until like a year ago. And a couple of my realtor friends have purchased a couple journey homes.
Yeah.
They couldn't be happier with them.
Buy for 400, put 20% down, interest rates at for an investor, 3.25 to 3.5 right now for a single family, and rent them out for $2,000.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. So, well, that's cool, man. So doing what you're doing, is there any reason for an individual, not a realtor, to reach out to you for your services? And if so, how would they contact you if that's something that, is of any value to anybody out there?
Yeah. So I do appraisals for private transactions sometimes if there's not a realtor involved, either before people put the property on the market, I can help them out before they contact a realtor. Or I'm doing one right now for two people, neighbors who are buying a house from their neighbors. So there's not a realtor involved there. So I don't have a website or anything like that. I'm pretty old fashioned that way, I guess. I don't really advertise or anything like that. It's mostly word of mouth.
Says a lot about your business.
Yeah, I think that's a good sign, right?
Absolutely.
So if people want to call me, they can call me or they can email me or text me. That's the best way to go about it. My phone number is 970-214-3413. You can call or text that number or email me at dseaser@gmail.com.
Awesome. I'll definitely have all that information in the comments below and the notes below. So that'll be easily accessible. It's interesting that you say that, because I completely forgot about a story of a friend of mine. He was moving back here from California. It was kind of a person-to-person transaction, no realtors involved. There was a price that they had kind of discussed, negotiated, and they came up with the concept of, hey, let's bring in 3 appraisals. And if there's a common denominator, great. Otherwise we can average them out and take the number. And my buddy benefited dramatically from it because the guy felt like his property was just far over what it was worth. And he was all for bringing in appraisers, and it just ended up, I think, not costing him, but saving my friend, I should say, I think about $100,000 on the deal. Yeah. So I mean, it's unbiased third party.
Exactly.
They can come in and provide what in your expertise is clearly from what we talked about with the education, vast.
Yeah. The unbiased thing is important. Our reports get reviewed by so many different people. It goes to an underwriter and it goes to the lender and it goes to the realtor and it goes to the homeowner. So we have so many people looking over our shoulder to make sure that we're not doing anything shady. So we're definitely a valuable part of the whole transaction.
Absolutely. Well, man, hey, I really appreciate you coming on. Honestly, like I said, one of the reasons before we started recording on this was I learned almost just as much as I'm hoping that others who watch this video, take from it. So I appreciate your time and willingness to come on and talk with me.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, man. I'm honored that you would think of me. And if anybody out there has questions, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm always happy to help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, everybody watching, I appreciate you. Comment and like below, subscribe, reach out to Drew. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So thank you for watching. And Drew, thank you for coming on.
Thanks. My pleasure.